At Thanksgiving, my sister said, "We all know you got fired for a reason." I served the turkey in silence. 3 days later, my old boss asked if I'd take his job. During Thanksgiving dinner, my sister Natalie looked straight at me across the table and, loud enough for everyone to hear, said, "We all know you got fired for a reason, Melanie." I stared at her, serving the turkey in silence, pretending I didn't hear her. Something inside me cracked open, something that had been festering for years. 3 days later, out of nowhere, my old boss called and offered me his job, something I had never even dreamed of. Now I'm sitting with this huge opportunity, and wondering if it's time to finally walk away from my family for good. Thanksgiving was always complicated in my family, but this year felt worse than usual. It wasn't just the usual undercurrents of tension or the snide comments hidden behind fake smiles. This time, everything was right there, on the surface, like a wound no one bothered to hide. I had already been nervous walking into my childhood home in Springfield, Illinois. The familiar creak of the floorboards, the same faded wallpaper, the smell of cinnamon potpourri, it should have been comforting. Instead, it made me feel small again, like I was 15 years old and waiting for someone to tell me what I'd done wrong. I arrived early, like Mom had asked. I cooked most of the meal because Natalie always found reasons to avoid the kitchen. She was too busy being admired, perched on a bar stool with a glass of Chardonnay, doling out half-hearted compliments about how domestic I looked. I said nothing. It was easier that way. Dinner was the usual chaos of clattering plates, half-shouted conversations, and forced laughter. Mom fluttered around, trying to keep things light. Alan, Natalie's husband, made predictable jokes about the Chicago Bears. The kids, Connor and Sophia, buried themselves in their phones. I was carving the turkey when it happened. Natalie set her wine glass down with a little clink, leaned forward, and with a tight, gleaming smile, said, "We all know you got fired for a reason, Mel." The words hung in the air like smoke. For a second, no one moved. Even Mom, who usually rushed to smooth over awkwardness, said nothing. I placed the carved turkey pieces onto the platter, keeping my movements steady. Nobody said a word. Nobody defended me. They all just let it sit there, sour and heavy in the middle of the table. It wasn't just the comment itself. It was the years behind it. The years of being the backup daughter. The one who worked hard but never quite enough, who was compared and criticized and finally, when I stumbled, kicked while I was down. I served the turkey. I smiled. I sat down and ate my dinner without saying another word. Inside, though, something shifted. A hard, cold understanding slid into place. I stayed through dessert because that's what polite daughters do. I cleaned up the kitchen while Natalie and Alan sat in the living room, laughing over something on his phone. Mom handed me a pie carrier with a bright, brittle smile and said, "Thanks for all your help, honey." I left without saying goodbye. The drive home was a blur. Lights blurred into streaks. The radio murmured white noise I didn't hear. When I got home, I sat in the dark living room for a long time, coat still on, staring at nothing. I wasn't sad, exactly. I was done. Done pretending, done begging, done holding out hope that they would ever see me as anything but the family afterthought. The next few days were a haze. I didn't answer texts. I didn't return voicemails. I stayed curled on the couch, rewatching old sitcoms on mute and eating leftover stuffing out of the container. Then, 3 days after Thanksgiving, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something in me, the same stubborn flicker that made me stay at Thanksgiving even after Natalie gutted me with her words, made me answer. "Melanie?" The voice was familiar, warm, a little hesitant. It was Rob Landry, Mr. L., my old boss at Midstate Freight Solutions. The one who had broken the news about my department being cut. "I know this is out of the blue," he said. "But I wanted to talk to you about something." He told me he was resigning. Not just leaving the company, he was walking away from corporate life altogether. Early retirement. He sounded lighter, almost giddy about it. But before I leave, he said, I recommended you for my role. I thought I misheard him. You're offering me your job? I asked, voice hoarse from disuse. Yeah. The higher-ups will have to approve it formally, but you're the first and only name I gave them. You know this company inside and out. Hell, you held half of it together during the worst of it. I sat there, blinking stupidly at my living room walls, feeling the pieces of my life rearranging themselves. The severance had been generous enough to keep me afloat, but I had assumed my corporate career was over. I had been making tentative plans to pivot, to what, I wasn't sure. Maybe freelance consulting. Maybe something totally different. But this? This was a second chance so big it didn't feel real. I'll need a little time to think, I said, but I already knew my answer. After I hung up, I sat there a long time, phone still in my hand, feeling a strange calm settle over me. I didn't tell anyone. Not Natalie, not Mom. Not even old coworkers I was still friendly with. It was mine, this secret little victory, and I wasn't ready to share it yet. Instead, I thought about Thanksgiving again. The way Natalie's voice had dripped with triumph when she said those words. The way no one had stood up for me. The way Mom had thanked me for cleaning up like I was the hired help. And I thought, maybe this wasn't a second chance to prove myself. Maybe it was a second chance to leave them behind completely. The days after that phone call felt different. I still did normal things, laundry, grocery shopping, walking around the frozen paths of Washington Park, but underneath, something new was blooming. It wasn't just excitement. It was something I hadn't felt in a long time, power. Control. Like maybe, for once, my life wasn't something that just happened to me. Maybe I got to steer. I accepted the offer officially after a second call with corporate. The salary was higher than anything I had ever made. 6 figures. Full benefits. Signing bonus. I read the offer letter 4 times just to make sure it was real. They wanted me to start immediately after the new year, but there were meetings I could attend remotely in December. It felt a little surreal, sitting at my little kitchen table, laptop open, coaching senior managers through transition plans like I hadn't just been fired 2 months earlier. Meanwhile, the silence from my family grew louder. Mom sent a couple of texts after Thanksgiving, things like "hope you're feeling better," and "don't be a stranger." But they were hollow, like she was offering lifeboats she had no intention of helping row. Natalie didn't reach out at all. In the past, that would have eaten at me. I would have written long apology texts without knowing exactly what I was apologizing for. I would have called Mom and babbled nervously, trying to get her to coax Natalie into speaking to me again. But not this time. This time, I let the silence stretch out like a bridge I had no intention of crossing. A week before Christmas, I got a thick card in the mail. The return address was Natalie's. Inside was a family photo, all 4 of them in matching red sweaters, fake snow falling around them in some studio setup. Across the bottom, in Natalie's sharp, looping handwriting, it said, "Merry Christmas. Family is what matters most." There was no personal message. No apology. No acknowledgement of what had happened at Thanksgiving. Just a glossy reminder of the image she was determined to maintain, the perfect family, without blemish, without complications like me. I almost threw it out. I almost ripped it in half. Instead, I placed it neatly back in the envelope and slid it into the back of my kitchen junk drawer, underneath expired coupons and rubber bands. Somewhere it would sit, forgotten. Like so many things Natalie had said over the years. By Christmas Eve, I knew I wasn't going to see them. Mom called once, leaving a voicemail asking if I was coming to our little gathering. I didn't call back. Instead, I drove myself to Cafe Moxo downtown, grabbed a steaming cup of hot chocolate, and took a long walk past the state capitol building, the air sharp and clean, my boots crunching in the fresh snow. Lights twinkled along the sidewalks. People bundled up in scarves laughed and held hands. I felt invisible and, strangely, invincible. The house was quiet when I got home. I made myself a simple dinner, pasta with butter and garlic, and watched old Christmas movies until I drifted off on the couch. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and read the final onboarding documents for my new job. No presents. No drama. No pretending. Just me, stepping into the life I was finally starting to build. A few days later, right before New Year's Eve, I got a text from Mom. It said, "Natalie thinks you're mad at her. Can you two please just talk before the new year?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Mad at her? The phrasing was so perfect, so familiar, it made my stomach turn. It wasn't Natalie who had hurt me, it was somehow me, being mad, making things uncomfortable for everyone else. I had seen this pattern 1,000 times before. Natalie wound the clock, but I was always the one blamed when it chimed. I didn't reply. Another text came in a few hours later, "Family is too important to throw away." Still, I said nothing. New Year's Eve came, and for the first time in years, I didn't spend it anxiously refreshing my phone, waiting for an invitation that would never really feel like an invitation. Instead, I bought myself a bottle of champagne, lit a candle, and toasted myself at midnight. To the woman who stayed. To the woman who left. To the woman who was learning to be both. The first week of January, things moved fast. I was flown out to the Dallas headquarters for a 2-day executive onboarding session. They put me up at a nice hotel, the kind with crisp sheets and room service menus tucked into leather binders. During the day, I sat in long meetings, learning about budgets and 5-year plans and new expansion markets. At night, I ordered quiet dinners for one and stared out the window at the city lights, marveling at the strange twist my life had taken. One evening, after a particularly long strategy session, I sat in the hotel bar nursing a glass of Merlot when my phone buzzed again. It was Natalie. Her message was short. "Can we please talk? I think we should clear the air." I didn't answer right away. I sat there, swirling my wine, thinking about what she would say if I called her. I could already hear it, her telling me she didn't mean it like that, blaming the wine, blaming the stress of the holidays, telling me I was overreacting. Maybe she would even say she was sorry, but it would be the kind of sorry you say to smooth things over, not the kind you say when you actually understand you hurt someone. For a moment, I almost responded. Then I thought about that Thanksgiving table, the faces turned away, the silence after her comment. How it wasn't just Natalie who hurt me, but how everyone else let it happen. And how, somehow, I was expected to be the one to fix it. The idea exhausted me. I closed the message without replying. I finished my wine, walked back to my room, and slept better than I had in months. A few days later, I moved into my new office back in Springfield. Not the little cubicle I'd spent 15 years in, the corner office, with glass walls and a view of the river. My name was already stenciled on the door, Melanie Warner, Regional Director. I stood there for a long moment, taking it all in. The thick carpet under my shoes. The heavy desk. The skyline twinkling beyond the frosted windows. It wasn't just a promotion. It was a rebirth. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what Natalie thought of me. I wasn't thinking about proving anything to anyone. I was thinking about what it would be like to finally live a life that felt like my own. The weeks rolled by. I threw myself into work, learning new systems, hiring new staff, fixing old problems the previous regime had left to rot. For the first time in years, my skills weren't just tolerated, they were valued. Respected. People listened when I spoke. It was like waking up from a long, cold sleep. And still, the messages from home trickled in. Mom's texts got increasingly desperate. Natalie misses you. Don't let pride ruin your relationship. Then, family is forever. And once, chillingly, you can't just erase us. I didn't respond to any of them. Natalie sent shorter messages. A question mark here. A call me there. But no apology. No acknowledgement of what had been said or done. They wanted me back under their thumb, playing the role they had written for me. Grateful. Apologetic. Smaller than them. I wasn't going back. By late January, the annual Midstate Freight Regional Gala was coming up. It was a black tie event held at a fancy ballroom downtown, the one with the chandelier the size of a small car. Executives, big clients, partners from other cities were all attending. And this year, as regional director, I would be hosting it. My assistant, Mallory, was buzzing about details nonstop. I let her handle most of it. I focused on preparing my keynote speech, the one where I would officially announce the company's new direction for the Midwest region. The night of the gala, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, adjusting the neckline of my sleek black gown. Simple, elegant, powerful. I didn't even recognize the woman looking back at me. Gone was the scared, apologetic Melanie. This woman was sharp. Calm. Unapologetically herself. When I arrived at the ballroom, flashes went off. Handshakes, smiles, glasses of champagne pressed into my hand. I was pulled into so many conversations I barely had time to breathe. Clients introduced me as the woman who saved Midstate Freight in the Midwest. Executives from Dallas treated me like I was one of them. It was overwhelming. It was wonderful. And then, halfway through the night, as I was speaking to a group near the bar, I heard a voice behind me. Melanie? I turned. It was Natalie. My heart thudded once, hard, and then settled. She looked good, in the way people do when they're trying too hard. Too much makeup. Too stiff posture. An expensive dress that didn't quite fit her right. Standing slightly behind her was Alan, looking uncomfortable, and, of all people, Roger, Mom's gentleman friend. I blinked, trying to understand. What were they doing here? It clicked a second later. Alan's company was one of Midstate's minor logistics partners. They must have been invited through work. I turned back to my group with a polite smile, finishing my conversation without acknowledging her further. A few minutes later, after excusing myself, I found Natalie hovering near the coat check, pretending to scroll through her phone. When she saw me, she straightened up. Melanie, she said again, her voice too bright. You look different. I waited. Natalie bit her lip. Can we talk? Please? I took a slow sip of champagne, feeling the coolness slide down my throat. I don't think that's a good idea, I said, my voice even. Not here. Her face fell. Why are you being like this? Because you made it very clear what you think of me, I said simply. At Thanksgiving. Remember? She flushed bright red. Look, it was a stupid comment, okay? I was stressed. I didn't mean anything by it. There it was. Not an apology. Not even an admission of wrongdoing. Just an excuse. I smiled slightly. You know, I said, keeping my voice light, getting fired was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I let the weight of that hang in the air between us. She opened her mouth, probably to say something defensive, but I wasn't interested. I hope you enjoy the event, I added politely. Excuse me. And just like that, I walked away. I didn't look back. Later, during my speech, I spotted her in the crowd. She was standing awkwardly near the back, arms crossed, while everyone else around her leaned forward, engaged, clapping at the right moments. I gave the best speech of my life. I talked about resilience, about reinvention, about not letting setbacks define who you are. I saw the nods, felt the energy shift in the room. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. That was my revenge. Not screaming matches. Not cruel words. Success. Peace. Distance. They had written me off. They thought I was finished. They thought I would come crawling back, begging for scraps of love. Instead, I had rebuilt my life so completely that they no longer fit into it. At the end of the night, as people were congratulating me and offering toasts, I caught one last glimpse of Natalie and Alan slipping out the side doors, looking small, out of place. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel sorrow. I just felt free. And that, more than anything, was the real victory.